Joining us now to provide some insight into this question, Regional Operations Director for the Council of American Islamic Relations, CAIR, commonly we know it by with the acronym, the CAIR operations in Florida, Nezar Hamze. Nezar, we thank you very much for taking time to join us today on America's Forum.
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
What is the appeal, do you think, not only to Muslims, but to disaffected youth in general about?
You know, there's a perfect example. Just recently, a couple of months ago, you probably remember there was a young man in Fort Pierce. His name was Munir. And he was an American, white, really looked just like me. And he came across some economic hardship, and he was basically recruited by these extremists, these terrorist groups to go fight. And I think, you know, in every pile of garbage, there's always a kernel of truth. In this situation, he went to go fight against Assad. And the United States government is also fighting against Assad. So, you know, there's always a little kernel of truth in any of these things when we really dive down. And I think, you know, obviously in his particular case, it was, you know, what Assad is doing to the innocent people of Syria.
Where do these young people get exposed to such extremism?
Definitely on the internet. We definitely see from all the media reports and all the investigative reports by, you know, law enforcement, it's definitely happening on the internet. I can tell you, because I travel quite a bit and I go to quite a few Islamic centers, we don't hear this violent rhetoric inside our mosque here in the United States, or at least in Florida, all the ones I've been.
And let's talk about that, because
Sure.
you, in fact, are Muslim.
Yes.
So what is your take on all this? Because a lot of people have become, you know, they're starting to hate Muslims and just group everyone together and classifying them all as extremists, all as terrorists. So this is very personal, I would imagine, for you.
Sure. You know, I get it. You know, I absolutely get it. I know what's happening around the world, and I see, you know, what everyone else sees in the media. And I think it's important for everybody to, you know, bring it home and establish relationships with their Muslim neighbors, and you know, see and build their relationship. I think that'll curb a lot of it, but that's the reality. We face it every day. You
mentioned, though, that this rhetoric is not being told in mosque around here, but that hasn't been the case necessarily in Boston, where this mosque has been under a lot of attack because terrorists have been coming out of this particular mosque.
Well, actually, it's the exact opposite of what happened in Boston regarding the Boston bombers and everything. The individuals that were basically kicked out of that mosque because of their violent rhetoric. So it was actually the opposite. It wasn't coming from the leadership of the mosque. But that poses a problem for the Muslim community, because instead of curbing and catching these extremists, we're kicking them out, right? And then obviously there's somebody there to accept them and say, hey, well, if they're going to kick you out, come over here, and you can be part of our little gang, you know. And that's basically what's happening.
Nezar, facing the situation, and Miranda touched on the concerns. Another common concern we hear from a lot of people is, in the wake of these actions, where are the groups such as CAIR in terms of offering explicit denunciations of either homegrown terror here or what could be considered acts of terror overseas? Has CAIR gone on record with explicit denunciations of these actions?
Yeah, well, CAIR is a federation of chapters, I'm sure, as you know, JD, and CAIR across the nation has explicitly, very concisely denounced all these forms of terrorism. However, there is a very strategic campaign against Muslims, and I always say this: whenever you're trying to hurt Muslims, and whenever you're trying to marginalize them, you always go. And CAIR is a perfect target, because CAIR is so large and has so much influence that if you want to really smear the Muslim community, you attack CAIR. But CAIR has been clearly on record denouncing all forms of terrorism, every terrorist act, and trying to mobilize the Muslim community and to counter this extremist rhetoric.
But clearly the message still isn't getting out, so more needs to be done. What would you recommend as someone who is American, Muslim, and you have said to me off the set that people don't normally associate you or look at you and target you as being Muslim? So you have a very different perspective. So what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think there needs to be a true partnership regarding this specific issue, and to keep it on point about what's happening right now with the American Muslims being recruited out of the United States. There needs to be a real partnership with the U.S. government and the Muslim community to really dissect and dive into and create a smart plan on how to deal with this issue together. If the government is just going to create a plan and hand it to the Muslim community, it's going to be rejected because the Muslim community is suspect of the government.
And with about a minute left, is that what's happened with the State Department and their so-called Think Again, Turn Away program? Did they consult anybody, to your knowledge, from the American Islamic community?
Not that I'm aware of. And I think, and I've been reading some articles and talking to some people about it, that may be the issue. That the Muslim community wasn't asked for their opinion, wasn't asked for input on the program, as far as I know, on how to deal with this extremism problem, specifically people going to Syria.
The challenge, Nezar, and I hate to hit you with it, I'm not trying to be unfair, but the observation was made, I believe it was Rick Santorum the other day, saying we don't hear Baptist pastors standing up advocating violence. So some of the scrutiny of the Muslim community is understandable, is it not? 30-second response, sir.
Yeah, I have seen, and you know, I've been on the show a couple of days, or last week, we're dealing with some of these imams. I don't see these imams too much here in the United States. I do see them abroad. But I think it's important that the Muslims that come out, like myself, and come out and oppose this are given equal stage with those individuals that are spewing this violent rhetoric.
Which is why we wanted you to come in this morning. And Nezar Hamze, we very much appreciate your time and your thoughts on this important issue.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Nezar Hamze, affiliated with CAIR in Florida. We'll have more on America's Forum following this Newsmax Now update.